If someone apologizes to you today, does that apology automatically qualify them to influence your tomorrow? Think carefully. Forgiveness may settle what you will no longer demand from the past, but influence is a decision about the future. Those are not the same decision. Many wounded people live under unnecessary guilt because they were taught one long spiritual equation. If I forgive, then I must reconcile. If I reconcile, then I must trust. If I trust, then I must restore full access. So they conclude that any hesitation is bitterness, any boundary is revenge, and any memory of harm is evidence that forgiveness was not sincere. That confusion can send a compassionate person back into preventable injury. Write this down. Forgiveness concerns the debt. Reconciliation concerns the relationship. Trust concerns credibility. Access concerns proximity and influence. 4 words, 4 questions, 4 decisions. Forgiveness asks, will I surrender personal vengeance and release my claim to make this person suffer as payment? Reconciliation asks, can we mutually face the truth and repair what was broken? Trust asks, what does this person's demonstrated conduct now make it reasonable to believe? Access asks, how close should this person be, and what influence should they have in my life? Do you see the difference? A person may receive mercy without receiving immediate intimacy. An apology may be heard without being treated as proof. Peace may be offered without placing your safety, responsibilities, private life, or future choices back into untested hands. You may release a person's debt without returning the keys to your future. That sentence is very important because some people have been carrying 2 burdens at once: the pain of what happened and the shame of trying to protect themselves afterward. But separating these decisions does not weaken forgiveness. It makes judgment precise. Compassion and discernment are not enemies. Mercy governs what you do with vengeance. Wisdom governs what you do with access. Now, this is not permission for punishment disguised as a boundary. It is not an invitation to keep someone begging forever. It is not revenge with religious vocabulary. The goal is peace, peace without spectacle, peace without denial, peace without hatred, and peace without repeated exposure to harm that could reasonably be prevented. So how do you decide what happens next? Not by pressure, not by a dramatic moment, not merely by tears, promises, family expectations, or your own loneliness. Relational proximity must be evaluated through demonstrated character, honest accountability, consistent conduct, respect for boundaries, and attention to safety. We will examine those tests carefully because change must become observable before it can become credible. For now, receive this relief. You do not have to decide everything in one moment. You can forgive sincerely today and still take time to evaluate reconciliation, trust, and access. But to do that wisely, we must slow down. We must stop using 4 different words as though they mean one thing. So let us define each one exactly. Begin with the first word, forgiveness. Forgiveness is the decision to relinquish personal vengeance. It is the surrender of your demand to make the offender hurt emotionally because you were hurt. Notice what it is not. Forgiveness is not amnesia. It is not approval. It is not calling wrong right, pretending damage was small, or denying what wisdom learned. You are releasing retaliation. You are not erasing reality. Now write the second word separately, reconciliation. Reconciliation is the mutually accepted rebuilding of a relationship. The important word is mutually. You can make yourself available for peace. You can speak without hostility. You can refuse to sabotage repair. But you cannot confess for another person, accept truth for another person, or produce cooperation inside another person's will. One person can extend peace. One person cannot manufacture mutuality. The third word is trust. Trust is confidence formed by credible patterns. It is not a prize awarded for impressive language. It is not a reward someone is owed because the apology sounded sincere or the emotion was visible. Emotion may reveal regret, but patterns reveal reliability. Trust answers a forward-looking question. Based on what has repeatedly become evident, what is now reasonable to expect? That answer may differ from one area of life to another, and we will come to that. The fourth word is access. Access is the degree of proximity, information, authority, intimacy, or influence you permit within a particular domain? Who may hear your private struggles? Who may participate in your decisions? Who may enter your home, handle responsibility, shape your children, manage resources, or occupy your emotional space? These are access questions. They are not automatically answered by affection, history, family connection, or apology. Very important. Equal human worth does not mean equal relational authority. You can honor a person's dignity without assigning them the same influence as someone whose character has been tested. Love may recognize worth universally. Responsibility distributes authority selectively. Now keep one difficult relationship in mind. Do not decide the entire future yet. Simply ask 4 questions. What am I releasing? What are we mutually rebuilding? What has become credible? What proximity is now wise? Suppose an apology comes. Forgiveness asks whether you will surrender the desire to collect emotional payment. Reconciliation asks whether both people are willing to face the same truth and participate in repair. Trust asks whether conduct has established a believable pattern. Access asks what degree of closeness or influence is appropriate now. The apology may begin the conversation, but it cannot complete all 4 evaluations. One statement cannot supply mutual work, create a pattern, or determine safe proximity. Look at the 4 terms you wrote. Which 2 have you been pressured to merge? Which decision were you told must happen immediately because another one happened sincerely? Some people have been answering every relational question with 1 frightened yes or 1 angry no. You no longer need to do that. Name the decision before you make the decision. This is the map. Release belongs to forgiveness. Rebuilding belongs to reconciliation. Credibility belongs to trust. Proximity belongs to access. Clear definitions. Keep mercy generous without making discernment careless. But now we must test the first definition. If forgiveness does not erase memory, cancel justice, or remove boundaries, what exactly happens to resentment? That is where we go next. Begin with forgiveness, because forgiveness is the decision you can make without waiting for another person's cooperation. It is an inward moral decision that says, I will not organize my future around revenge, repayment, or perpetual prosecution. The injury may explain part of your pain, but it does not have permission to govern your character. Write this down. Forgiveness changes your posture toward the debt. It does not rewrite the offender's record. That distinction protects both compassion and truth. You do not need to reduce the seriousness of the harm in order to release vengeance. You can name manipulation as manipulation, betrayal as betrayal, abuse as abuse, and still refuse to make retaliation your life's assignment. Mercy does not require inaccurate language. In fact, mercy becomes meaningful only when you are honest about what you are choosing not to avenge. Now consider memory. Remembering is not the same as rehearsing. Memory preserves information. What happened, what it revealed, what conditions made the harm possible, and what wisdom should do differently now. Rehearsing repeatedly summons the offense so that anger can renew its demand for payment. One retains the lesson. The other keeps reopening the courtroom. Ask yourself a difficult question. If this person never suffers enough to satisfy me, can I still choose not to become governed by the injury? That question exposes the difference between justice and emotional captivity. You may pursue appropriate accountability, you may tell the truth, you may cooperate with lawful or responsible processes. But your peace cannot depend upon watching another person experience an amount of pain that finally feels equal to yours. This is also where motives matter. A boundary can look identical from the outside and be completely different on the inside. Punitive distance says, I will withhold contact so you feel what I felt. Responsible distance says, I will limit contact because this pattern disrupts peace, damages responsibility, or threatens safety. The first uses separation as a weapon. The second uses separation as stewardship. Imagine, hypothetically, a family member whose private conversations repeatedly become coercive or verbally abusive. Forgiveness may mean you stop bringing up an old offense merely to humiliate them, stop recruiting relatives to punish them socially, and stop using their failure as ammunition in every disagreement. Yet you may still decline private conversations. You may choose written communication, the presence of another responsible person, or no contact for a period of time. That is not necessarily resentment. It may be wisdom responding to a pattern that has not changed. Do you see it? You can stop weaponizing yesterday without pretending yesterday taught you nothing. You can release hostility while retaining discernment. You can desire another person's good without volunteering for another preventable injury. And hear this safety guardrail clearly. Threats, violence, stalking, coercion, or abuse do not create a duty for private contact. Forgiveness does not require secret meetings, immediate replies, physical proximity, or unsupported exposure. Appropriate distance may remain necessary, and qualified legal, clinical, pastoral, safeguarding, or emergency support may be required according to the situation. So examine the difficult relationship you have in mind. Is your boundary trying to produce suffering, or is it protecting responsibility, peace, and safety? Are you preserving a lesson, or repeatedly feeding a demand for repayment? The heart can become free even while the facts remain intact. But forgiveness answers only what you will do with vengeance. It does not tell us whether the other person is willing to face the same truth with you. That is the separate work of reconciliation. Because a heart may release alone, but a relationship can be rebuilt only together. So the question now is not merely, have I released vengeance? The question is, what is the other person doing with the truth? Forgiveness can begin within your own heart, but reconciliation requires responsible movement from both sides. You can offer peace alone, but you cannot rebuild partnership alone. Write this down. Reconciliation is not forced proximity. Reconciliation is a mutual response to truth. What does responsible repair require? Truthful acknowledgement, ownership of conduct, willingness to listen, change behavior, respect for limits. Notice that none of these guarantees the relationship will return to its former condition. They simply establish whether genuine rebuilding has begun. Reconciliation is not a promise that everything will become what it was. Sometimes what it was helped create the problem. Now, do not confuse distress with responsibility. A person may be deeply upset because they lost access, damaged their reputation, embarrassed themselves, or encountered consequences. Their tears may be sincere. Their loneliness may be real. But regret over consequences is not necessarily ownership of conduct. Responsibility says, I did this. It affected you in these ways. I will not blame your reaction for my behavior. I am willing to hear what I would rather not hear, accept appropriate limits, and change the pattern. That language does not manipulate you into comforting the offender before the injury has even been addressed. It makes room for your experience. An apology can open the door to a conversation. Accountability determines whether rebuilding can continue. Consider a friendship in which one person repeatedly makes disrespectful remarks in public, then apologizes in private. The private apology may sound warm, it may even be emotionally moving. But reconciliation does not begin merely because the offended friend says, I forgive you. It begins when both people name the actual pattern, public dishonor followed by private regret. If the person apologizing says, you are too sensitive, I was only joking, or why are you still discussing this after I said sorry? Then the two friends are not yet facing the same reality. One is naming a pattern, the other is trying to escape discomfort. But if the person listens, acknowledges the repeated conduct, stops demanding immediate normality, accepts a slower pace, and behaves differently in future public settings, then repair has something solid to work with. Are you with me? Reconciliation is not proved by the intensity of an apology. It is revealed by participation in repair. And repair may happen in degrees. A relationship may become civil without becoming intimate. Conversation may resume while collaboration remains paused. Agreement may exist in one area while distance remains necessary in another. Reconciliation may be gradual, partial, domain-specific, or currently impossible. None of those conditions makes forgiveness false. They simply describe what mutuality can responsibly support at this time. History alone cannot carry a relationship. Attraction cannot carry it. Sentiment cannot carry it. Durable relationship requires shared direction, regard for safety, openness to wise counsel, growth in character, and a purpose larger than preserving appearances. Two people may treasure what they once shared and still discover that they are not presently walking toward the same kind of future. So examine the relationship you have been holding in mind. Are both of you naming the same conduct? Are both listening? Are both accepting responsibility? Are both respecting limits? Or are you being asked to forgive, explain, initiate, reassure, wait, absorb the discomfort, and perform the entire repair by yourself? You are responsible for the honesty and peace you bring. You are not responsible for manufacturing another person's repentance, maturity, or cooperation. Your goodness is not measured by your ability to produce mutuality where the other person refuses truth. But suppose both people do desire repair. Suppose both can acknowledge what happened and participate responsibly. One question still remains. What evidence makes renewed confidence reasonable? Mutual willingness may begin reconciliation, but trust must be established by something slower and more demanding: credible conduct. Credible conduct answers the question that sincere intention cannot answer. Trust is confidence placed in demonstrated reliability within a specific domain. Notice the precision. Confidence, demonstrated reliability, specific domain. Trust is not a declaration that someone is valuable. Human worth is not on trial. Trust asks whether a particular responsibility can reasonably be placed in this person's hands. Write this down. Time does not rebuild trust by itself. Accountable conduct practiced through time can. A year passing is not evidence of change. Silence is not evidence of change. Distance may prevent another incident without transforming the character that produced it. The issue is not simply, how long has it been? The issue is, what has been consistently practiced during that time? 4 tests help answer that question. First, truthfulness without evasion. Does the person tell the truth when accuracy costs them comfort, image, or advantage? Or do details change whenever responsibility approaches? Second, ownership without blame shifting. Can they name their conduct without making you responsible for causing it? Mature ownership does not hide behind pressure, misunderstanding, provocation, or good intentions. Third, consistency beyond a brief emotional period. Many people can change while consequences are fresh. Credibility develops when responsible conduct continues after the meeting ends. The tears dry, attention moves elsewhere, and doing right becomes inconvenient. Fourth, respect for boundaries without retaliation. What happens when the answer is no? Do they remain respectful, or do they punish the limit through anger, withdrawal, gossip, guilt, pressure, or sudden claims that you are unforgiving? A boundary does not merely restrict conduct, it reveals character. Now, accountability is not humiliation. It is not public shaming, endless suspicion, or requiring a person to crawl beneath their dignity. Accountability is the willingness to let claims of change be examined by consequences, correction, and time. A teachable person does not demand that words be accepted without evaluation. They understand that damaged confidence may recover more slowly than regret appears. A promise states intention. A pattern reveals what governs conduct. Do not despise promises. They may express a sincere beginning, but do not assign a promise the weight that only a pattern can carry. Good intentions can announce direction. Repeated choices show whether someone is actually traveling in that direction. Consider a family member who has repeatedly misused shared money. That person may be welcomed at a family gathering, treated with dignity, included in conversation, and loved sincerely. Yet none of that qualifies them to manage a common account. Financial trust would require financial evidence, transparency, accurate records, responsible decisions, acceptance of oversight, and consistency when personal desire conflicts with agreed limits. This is domain-specific trust. Someone may be dependable in conversation and unreliable with money. They may be generous in a crisis and careless with confidential information. They may perform well at work and remain unproven in emotional conflict. Do not convert strength in one area into automatic credibility in every area. And do not convert failure in one area total declaration that the person possesses no good character anywhere. Precision protects you from hopeful guessing and cynical absolutism. Ask 4 questions about the relationship before you. What has actually changed in observable conduct? Who, besides the person making the claim, can responsibly verify that change? How long has the new pattern persisted through inconvenience and correction? What happens when this person hears no? These questions do not guarantee future behavior. No human evaluation can remove every uncertainty. They allow confidence to rise in proportion to evidence. Durable partnership looks for sound fruit, shared direction, regard for safety, openness to counsel, growth in character, and commitment to a purpose beyond immediate comfort. No single sign proves the future, but converging patterns can make wise confidence increasingly reasonable. Trust, then, need not be permanently denied or prematurely restored. It can be specific, measured, and responsive to evidence. The next question is practical. If this is the level of trust presently established, how much proximity and influence can it responsibly support? That question converts discernment into stewardship. Access is the practical expression of trust. It determines how much of your life another person may approach, receive, direct, or affect. Relational access should be proportional to present character, verified responsibility, and the risk carried by the role. What does access include? Your time, your conversations, private information, physical space, financial resources, decision-making authority, influence over dependence, participation in future plans. These are not one privilege. You may permit conversation without disclosing personal struggles. You may share physical space in a group without sharing financial authority. You may welcome someone into a present event without giving them influence over future decisions. Without these distinctions, people tend to choose between two extremes: unsafe intimacy or resentful disappearance. But wisdom provides graduated options. Write down these 5 levels of proximity. First, compassionate distance. You refuse vengeance and may sincerely desire the person's good, while direct involvement remains absent because contact is presently unsafe, destructive, or unsupported by credible responsibility. Second, limited structured contact. Communication may occur at defined times through selected methods, in public settings, or with another responsible person present. Contact exists, but conditions protect peace and safety. Third, cooperative contact within a narrow domain. You may work together on one family matter, practical responsibility, or shared obligation without reopening private emotional access or broader authority. Fourth, renewed personal closeness. Conversation becomes freer, vulnerability grows, and ordinary companionship returns because responsible conduct has become sufficiently established. Fifth, restored high-trust partnership. Significant responsibility, intimate knowledge, shared decisions, and meaningful influence may again be entrusted because the character required for those roles has been demonstrated. Are you with me? These levels are not punishments. They are not permanent names attached to a person's identity. They describe what the available evidence can responsibly support today. New conduct may justify increased access. An unchanged pattern may keep access limited. Deception, retaliation, renewed instability, or disregard for safety may require access to decrease. The level changes when the relevant evidence changes, not merely when pressure increases. Consider an extended family celebration. A relative may be invited, greeted warmly, included in a meal, and treated with genuine respect. That social welcome does not automatically include being alone with children, directing family finances, receiving private emotional information, or participating in major future plans. Each privilege carries a different risk. Each role requires relevant reliability. Every person may deserve humane treatment. Not every person is presently qualified for every role. This is where guilt must lose its power. Love may seek another person's good without making that person the manager of your peace. Love may remain generous without surrendering your resources. Love may hope for growth without granting immediate influence over your future. Open-heartedness is not the abandonment of responsibility. Love can remain open-hearted while access remains measured. Now understand the nature of a boundary. A boundary identifies what you will responsibly do. It does not command what another person must feel. You are not allowed to be angry as an attempt to control an emotion. If this conversation becomes insulting, I will end it and revisit the matter later, is a boundary. You must agree with my decision seeks control. I will discuss this decision only in a respectful setting, defines your participation. A healthy limit, therefore, requires no hostility. It can be clear without being cruel, firm without becoming theatrical, and hopeful without becoming vague. You are not declaring that change is impossible. You are deciding what present responsibility permits. But selecting the level is only half the work. The next question is how to communicate that decision so the limit is unmistakable, the conditions for reconsideration are observable, and room for accountable growth remains without guaranteeing restoration. Now, discernment must become communication. A boundary hidden in your mind cannot guide a relationship. It must be expressed in language that is specific, enforceable, proportionate, and open to honest review. Use 4 parts. First, name the relationship you value or the humane intention you intend to preserve. Second, describe the relevant conduct accurately without exaggeration or character assassination. Third, state the boundary that applies now. Fourth, identify the evidence that could justify reconsideration later. Write this principle down. Truth explains the limit. Hope explains how the limit may be reviewed. What might that sound like? Not as a universal speech, but as one hypothetical pattern. I care about our relationship, and I have chosen to forgive what happened. However, repeated dishonesty and pressure have made private contact unwise for me at this time. For now, I will communicate only in a structured setting. If you consistently speak truthfully, accept the limit without retaliation, and participate responsibly over time, I will review whether different contact has become appropriate. Notice what that statement does. It affirms forgiveness without pretending confidence has returned. It limits present access without pronouncing a permanent sentence. It names observable conduct without promising that improved behavior will purchase intimacy. Reconsideration is possible. Restoration is not guaranteed. This is very important. Do not negotiate a major boundary while emotionally flooded. Composure protects precision. Pause. Write the decision. Seek wise counsel where appropriate, and communicate when you can remain steady. You do not need to debate every disputed detail with someone who repeatedly distorts, pressures, or exhausts the conversation. State enough truth to explain your participation. Then stop turning the boundary into an endless trial. And never announce a consequence you cannot enforce. If you say contact will end when intimidation begins, you must be prepared to end the contact. If you declare a limit and abandon it whenever discomfort arrives, the message becomes unclear to both people. Consequences must also correspond to the risk. Financial misuse should affect financial access. Breaches of confidentiality should affect access to private information. Intimidation should affect the method, setting, or frequency of contact. Do not impose unrelated penalties merely to make the person suffer. The purpose is protection and responsibility, not emotional revenge. Now create a written review plan. Record 5 things: the present boundary, the responsibility, peace, or safety it protects, the evidence required before reconsideration, an appropriate interval for review, and the trusted counsel you may consult when the situation carries serious risk or your judgment is vulnerable to pressure. A review can produce 3 honest outcomes. The boundary may remain because the evidence is insufficient. Access may cautiously increase because relevant responsibility has become consistent. Or access may decrease because new conduct has increased the risk. Review does not mean progress must be rewarded with the exact relationship another person desires. It means you will reassess reality instead of being governed by guilt, fear, nostalgia, or pressure. Do not turn the review date into a countdown. 30 days, 6 months, or any chosen interval does not guarantee restoration when the calendar expires. Time provides an opportunity to observe. Conduct provides the evidence. And watch the response to the boundary itself. Does the person show patience or apply pressure? Do they accept responsibility or shift blame? Do they respect the limit or retaliate against it? Their response is not a distraction from your evaluation. It is part of the evaluation. A sound boundary carries truth about what cannot continue and hope about what responsible growth may make possible. It neither condemns identity nor mortgages the future. Prepare now for the final exercise. Draw 4 columns for one real relationship: forgiveness, reconciliation, trust, and access. In the closing movement, you will gather every distinction into one written decision, one that keeps compassion alive, judgment sober, and your future responsibly governed. Now bring the entire framework into one honest decision. Forgiveness releases the debt. Reconciliation asks whether repair is mutual. Trust evaluates whether character and accountability have become credible. Access assigns proximity and influence in proportion to the evidence. 4 decisions, 4 different questions, 1 responsible future. Look at the 4 columns before you and keep one relationship in mind. Do not write what pressure wants you to write. Do not write what fear, loneliness, or appearances demand. Write what is true. In the first column, record what you are releasing. Name the demand for personal vengeance, the desire to humiliate, the need to make the other person suffer before you permit yourself peace. You are not erasing the facts. You are refusing to let the offense dictate your character. In the second column, write what mutual repair would require. What truth must both people acknowledge? What ownership, listening, correction, or respect for limits must exist? Be precise. Reconciliation cannot be built from one person's effort and another person's pressure. In the third column, record the evidence that presently exists. Not the speech you heard, not the future you imagine. What conduct can you actually observe? Is there truthfulness, ownership, consistency, teachability, and respect when the answer is no? Hope may remain generous, but hope is not evidence. In the fourth column, choose the access that is presently wise. What contact, information, responsibility, proximity, or influence can current reliability safely support? Write the level that matches reality, not the level that proves you are loving. Now test your motive. First, does this boundary protect safety and responsibility, or is it secretly designed to produce pain? Second, are you responding to demonstrated change or promoting possibility into proof because you want the struggle to be over? These questions guard you from revenge on one side and wishful surrender on the other. Then write one calm sentence you can communicate. Keep it humane, accurate, and enforceable. State what you have chosen, what limit now applies, and what conduct would permit later reconsideration. Beneath that sentence, write one observable condition for review. One condition. Not when things feel better, but conduct that can be recognized without guessing. And now we can answer the question that began this entire journey. Does forgiveness restore another person's authority over your future? No. A person may be forgiven and still remain unqualified for influence. Mercy can release the past without transferring tomorrow into hands that have not demonstrated responsibility. Peace is freedom from 2 captivities. It is freedom from resentment that keeps you chained to what happened, and freedom from repeated surrender that keeps exposing you to preventable harm. One captivity poisons the heart. The other abandons stewardship. Mature peace refuses both. Perhaps restoration will deepen. Perhaps the relationship will remain limited. Perhaps further evidence will show that greater closeness is unwise. You are not responsible for predicting the outcome. You are responsible for faithful, truthful stewardship of the evidence available now. So keep your heart free and your gates governed. A compassionate person can forgive. A discerning person can evaluate. A responsible person can govern access.